First, the mainstream media told us that illegal immigration wasn't happening. Then we were told that illegal immigration was happening, but it was a good thing. And now we're being told that it must be fixed, but that the 15 million illegal immigrants who have come into our country over the last 4 years are just, oopsie, they're here to stay. There's nothing we can do about it. This MSNBC guest that I'm about to show you just had a mental breakdown on Donald Trump in winning this election as well as immigration. Take a look at the lunacy.
There's ugliness out there that's not reducible to him, and this is what makes me nervous. And I'm a Kamala Harris fan, right? And that is, Hillary Clinton in 2016 thought she had the base locked. And she thought that what she needed to do was to go for that middle. And these folk would turn out. They didn't. And then in the middle, those folks, undecided folk, Republicans, they went home. Joe Biden was elected because historic numbers of folks showed up, right? They made a decision. And so the second largest turnout ever, Donald Trump got in 2020. So it took historic numbers to beat him, right? And so now we get enamored with the Dick Cheneys and the Liz Cheneys and the Flakes and the da-da-da-da, right? And this man is running around here busting his chops, scaring the hell out of communities. Right? And we're trying to figure out how to keep that middle, locked in on her when she needs to bust him in his mouth. I'm saying it like that because he's dangerous. He's dangerous to particular people. And the history of the country is such that we can't play fast and loose with it. Fast and loose with it. Does that make sense?
Isn't it incumbent on all of us to protect the people who are endangered by him?
But you never have. That's the rub. You never have. And so part of what we have to do in the midst of this is to engage in a deep-seated political calculus, right? Even though we know that she has to get the middle, we got to come out and try to figure out how to turn out in large historic numbers, because we got to keep this troglodyte out of office. Because if he comes in, our babies are going to be in danger. Because remember, those young children are going to grow up with the memory of having to not go to school for the threat of bombs. And somebody told them that their moms and dads eat cats. They eat cats and dogs. I'll get myself together, Claire.
Okay, take a minute. Deep breaths.
Through the temper tantrum that was there was actually a kernel and an element of truth to what he was saying, and this is about turnout, something I've talked a lot about on the show. He's talking about turnout in here. Now, here's the problem for them and what he's talking about. What he is prescribing for the turnout game for Democrats is that they should double down on their base instead of spending the time to reach out to moderates. And I really hope they do that as someone who's supporting Trump, because he actually has it all twisted. This guy that's talking to the MSNBC host, he's got it twisted around what happened in 2016 and what they need to do in 2024 as a result of that. It was not that Hillary Clinton focused too much on the moderates. In fact, there were some states that some key swing states that Hillary Clinton literally never even campaigned in. Like maybe went once or twice, while Donald Trump had like 15, 20 rallies there. So that was not the problem. The problem was that she relied on her base too much. She wanted to replicate what Obama had done, and it turns out that Hillary Clinton and Kamala Harris are not Barack Obama. As someone on the right, I can say Obama, yeah, he's a trickster, he's a good speaker. Clinton and Harris, yeah, they're not good. They got a lot of baggage, they're not good speakers. The other problem with this guy's assessment is that he thinks that turnout was historic in 2020. Technically, yes, it was historic, but that was all because they changed the rules for COVID. And so if people, again, I really hope people on the left who are advising Kamala Harris are telling this, because if they're looking at 2020 and they're thinking that we're going to have the same kind of historic turnout in 2024, they're dead wrong. They're wrong for a few reasons, and I've talked about it in past reasons, but again, the biggest is just that the rules don't apply this time because Democrats put specific rules in place during 2020 that allowed a lot more people to vote than usually would have voted. And I'm mostly talking about mail-in ballots, which are usually illegal in some states and were made legal during COVID. So this brings me to one of the biggest beliefs that I hold. And it's a huge problem for Democrats, especially in what this guy's talking about. The reason why Democrats and leftists are destined to fail, I personally think in this election, but just in the long run, is because they're detached from reality. They tried to shape reality, and you can see this all the time from when they're talking about how there's no definition for gender anymore, or how morality is just relativistic for them. And that's simply not true. And so they're trying to shape this reality, but at the end of the day, reality is reality. There is objective truth. And when they're cutting against it, and I'm not saying Republicans are perfect, that they're just true in all things, but they are not as detached from reality as Democrats are, it has electoral consequences. Big electoral consequences for Democrats, because it turns out if you're detached from reality and what's actually happening in America, you make the wrong decisions. Again, for instance, if you think that Kamala Harris is somehow Barack Obama, you're detached from reality. And if you treat those races as the same, you're going to lose, because Kamala Harris has to appeal to the moderates if she wants to win. Again, very happy if she just doubles down on her base, because Donald Trump will win if that happens. I think this guy is the perfect example, though, of how Democrat elites think, and they may very well lose because of it. So that was in America, guys, but America isn't the only one fighting the woke globalist mob. The UK is as well. I'm going to show a clip of that, but really quick, before I do want to talk about one of the partners of this show, the Daily Wire. So you know the Daily Wire, but did you know, guys, that they have new children's content? Don't pay woke companies like Disney anymore to indoctrinate your kids. You've seen the clips online. Some of the stuff that are in these new TV shows are crazy. And it's not just Disney, it's a lot of companies, by the way. So use my link in the description below for 47% off at the Daily Wire content. That includes the Bent Key children's content, so we can get back those good old-fashioned kids shows, guys. The kinds that almost the parents wanted to watch. I know Bluey's a good example. Bluey actually is out there. I'll give him credit for that. You know the ones I'm talking about, the ones without gender fluidity, for example. Again, 47% off in the special link in the description below. The BBC, essentially just a left wing, just a wing of the left wing in the UK. Honestly, at this point, they got clobbered by this conservative from the UK. Here it is.
Now, you've written this morning about immigration, and you write that we cannot assume that all cultures are equally valid. So which cultures, in your view, are less valid than others?
Oh, lots. Cultures that believe in child marriage, for instance, or that women don't have equal rights. I actually think it's extraordinary that people think that's an unusual or controversial thing to say. Of course, not all cultures are equally valid. I don't believe in cultural relativism. I believe in Western values, the principles which have made this country great. And I think that we need to make sure that we continue to abide by those principles to keep the society that we have now.
So which particular cultures then would you say are less valid? Because as you've said, your words, not mine, some people think that that is a controversial thing to say. So which cultures would you specifically say are less valid than others?
So it's not about labeling cultures. Culture includes a lot of things. I'm not talking about cuisine, I'm talking about customs. And I think that cultures where women are told that they should not work, I would knock on doors. I'm sure Penny and Jake had this. You'd knock on doors and you'd see somebody at the door who says, oh, I can't speak to you, I will get my husband. I don't think that's as equally valid as our culture. But the point I was making in the op-ed was about immigration, that immigration is something which we need to make sure we get right. We didn't before. And there were three things I said we needed to do. One, numbers matter. I was quite surprised that Rob actually misrepresented what I've been saying. Numbers do matter. Culture matters even more. Who comes into the country is absolutely critical. And leadership. You need to start from the top. It's no good simply saying we're going to lower immigration and outsource it. It has to come very much from the Prime Minister himself or herself.
Are you saying, though, that if somebody in their culture who lives here in the UK, who might be a British citizen, who answered the door to you and said, I won't speak to you, I'd like you to speak to my husband instead, are you saying, you have said their culture is less valid, are you saying that people with those beliefs shouldn't be welcome in the UK?
I am saying that if we want to have a well-integrated society, we need to make sure that we have a shared culture and a shared identity. This is a multi-ethnic society. That's obvious. I'm a black woman sitting here talking to you. But there is a difference between being multi-ethnic and being multicultural.
It's like what she says there. How is this even controversial? It's not even particularly conservative, by the way, to say that some cultures are better than others. And I'll give you an example. There are many liberals who intuitively think this way. For instance, for a long time, there was all this talk about how in Saudi Arabia, women couldn't drive. And it's pretty common in a lot of these Muslim countries that not only can they not drive, but they can't go out without a man. And if you talk to any liberal out there, they'll say, yeah, that's not good. And it's like, okay, but the reason why that is because of the culture that they hold. And again, that's something that liberals would very much agree with. So if you're telling me that the feminists on the left think that their culture is equal to the Western culture there in Saudi Arabia, no. The answer is no. They might come out and say, oh yeah, it's all equal, but they don't even believe that. And again, those are on the left. If you're talking about people on the right, then of course it's a no-brainer. And the biggest thing is that it's not a question of race. It's a question of culture. And this is something that I feel that the left just refuses to understand is that no one cares about your skin color anymore. The left is so fixated on skin color that if you bring something like this up, you say, yeah, I don't really believe, those Middle Eastern cultures are equal to the Occidental West. Like, I just think that, we're superior in that way, not because we have better worth, but just the culture. They'll be like, oh, you're just racist. And no. It has nothing to do with skin color. They cannot separate the culture and the skin color. And I'm sorry. I know the left wants you to believe we do, that people just really care about skin color because it helps them stay in power, but it's not true. We don't like people who are super different than us. I think that is true, but that is a question of culture. I'm just saying in human behavior, but I think that's much more of a question of culture than it is of skin color. So again, should we hate people because they're different? No, we shouldn't. But should we let every culture in to America? Also, no. Like, it's okay to look at what's happening in the Middle East and be like, I don't hate them. I have Christ-like love for them, but I don't want any of that near America. I just don't. And I'm sorry, it's not racist. I just don't want people coming over here and telling women that they can't drive. And that's just an example that would appeal to the average liberal. But somehow they have to make an argument out of everything. And again, you get to come into the country with merit. That's how it's always been. Like, this is the most conventional wisdom surrounding immigration. We don't care about your skin color. We care about what you bring to the table. It's super basic stuff. And it really is a transaction as well. We give a little, you give a little. Because the conventional wisdom behind immigration forever was that if you wanted to come into this country, just any country, if you want to come into our country, you have a culture. And I'm assuming because you want to come into our country, you like the culture here. So for most of the world, they want to come to America because of the culture of entrepreneurship, high wages, maybe even safety, even though the U.S. is definitely not the king in terms of safety. But, organized crime is better than a lot of other countries, say in Latin America. That's why we have a lot of immigrants from Latin America. So they want to come into our country. Great. However, in order to come into our country, again, this is the conventional wisdom of immigration, you have to offer something. It's a transaction. Part of that offering is making your culture secondary. You don't have to throw it out, but you have to assimilate. That is like the basic word of immigration. You must assimilate. And if you refuse to assimilate, then you can't come into a country. I'm sorry, you don't just get it. It's an invasion at that point. Immigration is when you go into a country and you take on their culture. And yeah, you might bring some cultural norms with you, but you're making that culture your primary one. If you're going into that country trying to influence it with your culture, you're invading that country. And that works for America, it works for Mexico, it works for China, I don't care where it is. That's just how it works, and it's always worked that way from the beginning of time. And again, this is intuitive because even people on the left will say they don't want terrorists from Iran coming into the country, for example. There's a culture in Iran. There's a culture in Gaza where they are openly saying death to America. That is a culture. And do we want that culture in America? If they're saying death to America, no. And leftists, they would agree with that. They would. But somehow you say that about anyone else and they want to act like there's an argument there. Of course, there's an inferior culture that we're talking about in Iran, for example. And I think that's true for many cultures. And it has nothing to do with race. It's just the cultural norms that we don't want in America. Obviously, that's one of the extremes when I'm talking about Iran, but this is controversial, or this is not controversial, rather, for anyone, because it's just true. And this girl explains it really well in that video, and I think 99% of Americans agree with her. Thank you so much for watching, everybody. Please go down below, comment, like, and subscribe, and watch another video.